Okay, Souls of Black Comics. Obviously it would help if I hit start on my little timer here. Okay. Obviously taken from W.E.B. Du Bois's classic piece, The Souls of Black Folk, talking about this notion of being African American and also being, or being black and also being American simultaneously to a certain degree, and how those particular ideologies kind of rip against each other. And so I thought it was an apt title for this particular talk. Those of you who think I'm talking about black comedians, you can go ahead and leave now, because I'm not talking, even though I love these folk. That's Richard Pryor, by the way, a very young Richard Pryor. Anyway, but yeah, so a lot of people think that when I say black comics, I'm talking about black comedians. I was like, no, not at all, actually. But I do have a really quick joke, because you're supposed to start with a joke. So stop me if you heard this one. So this guy walks into a bar with a pig under his arm. Have you heard this yet? Have you heard this before? Guy walks into a bar with a pig under his arm. Punchline is, the guy in your head right now, is he a white guy? Probably, right? And what I'm getting at is that whiteness as a construct inhabits normality, right? Everything else is kind of othered, right? So you guys familiar with this particular piece that happened with Mark Anthony, where there was this horrific, kind of racist diet. I talk about race and stereotypes, by the way, so I'm sorry. This is all about fear. We don't like talking about racism. I don't give a shit. This whole piece about like Mark Anthony being like, oh, who is this foreigner singing the national anthem at the American pastime? He was born in fucking New York City. He's American, right? So my idea is like, okay, what does the average American body really look like? Still, it's a white, straight, male body, still. I was born in Mississippi, by the way. So this notion of representation, portrayals of things. I'm kind of like a stereotype hunter. I hunt them down, I sniff them out, I kind of debunk them, look at them. I teach semiotics and visual rhetoric and also teach design history. So I'm very serious about destroying inequity on all fronts, as an educator, as a designer, and as a comic book artist. Because comics, they're not really serious, right? And they're very subversive because of that, right? Anybody see this show, Misfits? Ooh, yeah, it's a great show. I like the show, actually. I'm such a big geek, it's kind of stupid. My favorite show, please don't laugh at me, Doctor Who. I know, man. Oh, see? Oh, man, I'm so excited to see what this dude, what's his name? I forgot his name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm going to watch it any damn way. So anyway, this is a BBC show, and it's called Misfits. Anybody ever seen Heroes, the TV show Heroes? Which was kind of like an NBC show. It's kind of like X-Men. It was very multicultural, and all these people get these superpowers. This is kind of like that. It's almost like Heroes meets Breakfast Club. And the reason why I say Breakfast Club is because they're kind of like in detention. They're like, early 20-year-olds, and they all like are working off their sentence or whatever, like doing like, community service and stuff. And so they all get superpowers because there's always an event that gives people superpowers, right? And so there's a storm, and they all get these powers, right? And it's for adults, so there's a lot of cussing and there's sex and stuff. And so so this brother here, he gets the ability to turn back time, which is pretty awesome. He becomes immortal, which is also kind of awesome, depending upon what happens. She's a mind reader. This gentleman can turn invisible. This beautiful black woman, what's her power? When you touch her, you have to have sex with her. That's her power. Woohoo, she's a super rapist. Seriously, no, that's what seriously. And what happens is when you touch her, you have to have sex with her, and when you let go of her, you forget. You forget you had sex with her. And I'm like, how is this on the air again? Because there's a particular stereotype around African American women called the Jezebel stereotype, which was constructed to basically legitimize the raping of black women during slavery. Because all of the stereotypes have very well designed, actually. They have particular functions. And that was the function of the Jezebel stereotype. I love the show, though. But what I try to do when it comes to like popular media is have as Bell Hooks calls, a loving critique, because you can actually love something right? But also be very critical about it as well, if you have the proper tools of analysis. And so it's my job as a professor to give my students those tools, right? So, banana, oh damn, black man about to talk about bananas. I like bananas, they're a great source of potassium, and they're lovely. So there's been a lot of like banana throwing recently. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a particular stereotype about African Americans in this country or just around the world that compare us to simians, apes, monkeys, right? So you get a lot of like really, really vehement, crazy memes around the banana being juxtaposed with black faces. That includes the Obamas, Cecile Kayenge, who is the new, I think she's from the Congo. She's Congolese, and she's the new, like, she's in charge of Italy. She's like the Barack Obama of Italy. And Adam Jones. And so this notion of like tossing bananas, is an insult, saying, oh, you ape, that kind of thing. Again, when you look at like symbols and signifiers, you have to look at the historical context of how things create a meaning, right? What I love about comics is that when you take a particular picture and you start putting pictures in a sequence, a story happens right in front of you. It's magical, it's so powerful, and it's very subversive, and anybody could do it. I can say, hey, make a comic about this, and you just take Instagrams and make a comic. To me, that's a comic, or you can just draw something and make a comic book. Anyway, so this is a new Marvel comic. I'm not gonna talk a lot about the mainstream comics because they get a lot of shine anyway with all these big movies, which I love, but I'm also, I have a critique of. So Marvel Comics, who is owned by Disney, they're putting out this new version of the Avengers, which is like one of their big books, right? And this is called the Mighty Avengers. And basically most of the characters are African American, Latino, or Latina, and also people of color. Like there's She-Hulk, I think, is in it actually, because I guess she's technically a woman of color, I suppose. And then there's the Latina, Luke Cage, I don't know if you Luke Cage. Luke Cage is like the first African-American superhero to ever have his own book. He comes out of the blaxploitation era. He came from like the 1970s and so. And there's a lot of characters who were created to kind of catch that, that kind of like blaxploitation, kind of exploitation vibe. A lot of those come from like the 1970s. Also characters like Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. He was pretty much like Bruce Lee with blue bracelets, pretty much, So anyway, so someone thought it was a good idea to do that in front of the Mighty Avengers. Someone took the Deadpool image and like slapped a banana on it, and it was a meme that went all over the place because like, okay, so you're gonna get a black or like black and brown characters in a major book, and you're gonna slap a banana on it. It reminded me of the Gabby Douglas incident where Gabby won all those awards, and then there was like this little monkey on a bar like right after, did you guys see that? Yeah. I was like in a bar in Buffalo, actually, and I was like, wait, what? I don't know. So a lot of the early images about comics come from minstrelsy, from blackface minstrelsy, which up until like the 1930s was kind of like the rock and roll of entertainment. There was a lot of like, coonery and minstrelsy going on until like the mid-30s. For instance, if you see that movie King Kong, like the Peter Jackson version of it, and when they meet the savages, and then when they translate it to the stage, it's a minstrel show, because that would have happened. It'd be like, because they didn't know how to like translate culture properly. It was like, and that's the nature of why stereotypes are so, powerful, but also so scary at the same time. Anyway, so a lot of the earlier characters are based off of these particular types of images. So one of the first characters is Whitewash. This character actually is kind of like, a coon character dressed up in like a zoot suit, if you ever seen like the Malcolm X movie back in the day, zoot suit. And he was with Captain America's team. It was called the Young Allies, right? And so it seemed like his superpower was getting like rescued by people because he would always be tied to a chair, he'd be tied to a bomb, and then like, Captain America or Bucky would have to come and save him, that kind of thing. But he spoke in like really broken English, and it's very stereotypical. And then of course there's Ebony White, who is, his name is Ebony White. There's other dude's name is Whitewash. Anyway, Ebony White, who was created by, Will Eisner, sorry, Will Eisner. He was a Jewish-American creator, and The Spirit was this really amazing, very innovative comic strip that he created to kind of combat what was going on with the comic strips, with the superheroes and stuff. So we're talking like the mid to late 30s. And so again, a character like Ebony White was not, I mean, that's basically how people of color were drawn. I mean, that's just kind of, and that's how he said it. Looking back on it, he said, okay, it was very problematic. But at the time, that was the vernacular of how you describe black people in comics. And so now, I mean, that's how he looks. Darren Cook has done a newer version of him. You know, this is what he looks like now. He's very critical of what he used to look like. He was like, oh my God, what the hell? Anyway, anyway, what's really interesting, so when we talk about black comics, I'm not really necessarily talking about race, I'm talking about ideology, because really those particular types of things, whiteness, blackness, they're constructs, right? They're social constructs. I didn't come out the womb saying, hey, I'm a black dude from Mississippi. No, it's something that I became, something that I'm learned to kind of react to. And that's the nature of identity, actually, and it's very interesting to me how those constructs work. So most of the time, I think most black folk or most people who have been oppressed in some way, whether it's ethnic, gender, whatever, are trying to figure out ways to circumvent those types of oppressions, because I hate boxes and I hate bullies. That's why I work the way I work. So anyway, this character was pretty amazing. It was created in 1939, only a year after Superman was created, by white artists, white writers. He's an African character called the Red Mask who was fighting against people who were trying to take over his country. So as you can imagine, it totally failed, right? But it was amazing because he's pictured as a really, really dark black man here, and it didn't sell well. So they actually try to trick the audience by making him white on the cover, and then they actually would change him back to like brown and black in the comic. It's like, anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, so this book just came out. If you're into sociology, Mark Anthony Neal, who was brilliant. He's like I think he's like the male version of Bell Hooks to a certain degree. His writing style, the way he thinks, I was on a panel with him a couple times. I'm like, please don't let me speak after you. Anyway, so he's really interested in this notion of like different types of legibilities around masculinity. And because if you think about it, it is a type of reading, right? So his kind of like hypothesis is that, bodies are inscribed with different types of text to a certain degree. And so, for instance, the thug, someone who's like the athlete, those particular types of stereotypes are inscribed upon the black male body, and they're very legible. And so, but there are also alternative types of like black masculinity that aren't as legible. And so he's looking for Leroy. He's referring to the kind of like ambiguously, the sexual nature of Leroy from Fame. Everybody seen Fame? Yeah, so you didn't really, he had this kind of like androgynous feel, right? And so he's like looking for that type of like open fluidity to like how we express ourselves, and that's why it's called Looking for Leroy. So this notion of reinscription is something that this gentleman was trying to do too, was Orrin C. Evans. He actually created the first totally black publication that was an anthology series of, it was called All Negro Comics. It came out in 1947, and he was a African-American journalist, right, in Philadelphia. And so what he did is actually put together a collection of these stories, and they only made one copy of it, right? And the reason why they only made one copy of it is because when people who unfortunately were white, saw what he was doing, they wouldn't sell him ink anymore, they wouldn't sell him paper, that kind of thing. And so, you might have the content, but we're not going to actually let you do this anymore, right? Because we have the control over that particular space. So it's unfortunate that only one piece got made. These gentlemen, they have this site called Complicated, and it's kind of funny because it's talking about the black hero origins from the 1970s, and they kind of like parsed out this kind of like algorithm. So it's like, okay, so black superheroes are raised in poverty, or they have been in the Olympics, or they have a criminal background, or they've been inspired by white heroes. And then you have these like corollaries, like the Tony Isabella corollary. He's the co-creator of Black Lightning, who's one of the first black superheroes. And it's like all these different characters have electrical powers too. Or, they have the whole like X-Men exception because he's he's a white man that actually inspires people from all different backgrounds, so you kind of like get a pass on that. And then the Jon Stewart impurity is basically you have a black character who's kind of like just not as good as his white counterparts, because Jon Stewart blew up an entire planet. Did you know that? The Black Green Lantern, he killed the whole planet. He should not have that ring. Anyway, what's wrong with that man, killing everybody? This is the part where I do my shameless plug. Yeah, sweet. All right, so I'm selling my book back in the back after this for like $20. Black Comics is the culmination of about 7 years of research about looking at this black independent comics culture that was jumping off since the mid-90s. And it's an art book, and it has 53 really, really talented cartoonists who just happen to be African American in one book. And so a lot of the times we're looking at this notion of stereotypes, right? No, we're not talking about Samsung or like any type of like boombox right here. This is stereos, right? Stereos, not stereos. It's different. Stereos is the root word for the word stereotype, all right? And it means hard or fixed. It's from the Greek. And it means hard or fixed, hard or fixed. And so this notion of trying to hack into, a stereotype is very difficult. They're very well designed, actually, and you see them popping up all the time, which is why I'm like a storm chaser, but I'm a stereotype chaser, right? I see one, I was like, oh, there's a stereotype, I see it, let's talk about it, They still pop up because they're designed to not change, right? They're designed to not change. So what do you do when you have like something that's designed to not change? You try to create production that goes around that kind of idea, right? So this is called black radical intellectual production. Don't get scared, I don't have a Molotov cocktail or anything with me. Radical means, it also comes from the Greek, it means roots. So basically going to the roots and changing something, right? So this notion of using the status quo, whatever is in the mainstream, and flipping it on its ear, like Major Sankofa, Captain America, right? But, he's flipped into this, this kind of Afrocentric character, same thing. I actually created this piece called Black Kirby that actually takes that and kind of pushes it really, really far. So this idea of creating a space where people from other backgrounds can actually be free to kind of reimagine, or destabilize stereotypes, right? Most of the work that I do is trying to actually look at these particular types of stereotypes and then undercut them, hack into them, change them, open them up, destabilize them, so that we can actually have a space where I can be what the hell I want to be. I don't have to be this stereotype. I don't have to be this box. I mean, I feel like boxes are made for breakdancing, so that's what I feel about it. Anyway. So it's not representation, it's representation, right? Taking the thing, flipping it on its ear, presenting it again, and say, hey, how about looking at it like this, right? So right now, if you look at things from that perspective, a lot of people around the world are actually taking this notion of blackness and this kind of post-racial, it's so not. Anyway, if anything, it's hyper-racial. That's a sad thing. That's another talk. Anyway, taking this notion of race and flipping it on its ear and actually using different modes of culture to create these speculative spaces. I'm really into you guys familiar with Afrofuturism? Octavia Butler, those particular writers. So basically, or Samuel Delany, people like that. Well, they're actually taking science fiction and using it as an allegory to talk about social issues, to talk about race, to talk about sex, to talk about all these different things simultaneously in a space where we can feel comfortable to do so. So I'm going to talk really quickly about, I'm going to try to keep this under 20. Oh well, I'm going to fail. Tertel Only, in 1993, created the idea of the black age of superheroes, or the black age of comics. And so basically, anybody collect comics, by the way? So you're familiar with the Golden Age, the Silver Age, Bronze Age, the different time spans between when comics are created. So he was like, well, what about the Black Age? When was that? And so that's what started the whole movement. Just him asking that question, he started the first Afrocentric or a comics convention in Chicago. And then other people really got excited about this as well. Now around the same time, Dawood Anyabwile, who used to be called David Sims, him and his brothers were created Brother Man, as it was pretty much like an advertising gimmick for their airbrush shop, and it became a national, just phenomena. He, from just going to different conventions and stuff, him and his brothers sold almost 1 million copies of these books that they were just creating out of the back of their vans. It was crazy. And distributed them, like Master P, out of the back of his car, Anybody familiar with Milestone Media? Milestone Media, anybody? Okay, cool. There you go, one person. We're geeking together. All right, so Milestone Media was, this venture by these gentlemen here, two of which are my mentors. This is Michael Davis, Dennis Cowan, Derek Dingle, who actually works for Black Enterprise right now, Dwayne McDuffie, who we lost a few years back, a couple of years ago, who was a force in the comics industry. So basically what they did is they created an imprint, a multicultural imprint, really. Not just like, oh, this is for black people, but everybody. So they had heroes from all, they were the first actually to have like, gay and lesbian superheroes. They had like, one of the main characters was called Zombie. He was a Korean American superhero. It's pretty weird, but I liked it a lot though. And so they were opening up this idea. It's like, how do you look at the superhero body now? What is the superhero body? And their legacy is still, they just actually celebrated like 20 years of that event. So I'm gonna run through this stuff. This is like the show and tell version of my talk. So Omar Bilal just closed down the Museum of Black Superheroes, but he basically created a space where we could meet and talk about these characters, and it was around for like 14 years. He just shut it down because there are other ways to do that through like Twitter and Instagram and other places, right? There's Bill Foster and Tim Jackson. They're both comics historians. Tim Jackson actually works for the Chicago Defender. He's still one of the only African-American cartoonists to work for a historically black newspaper. And then I have stuff like the East Coast Black Age of Comics Convention, which was inspired by Tertel on Lee's convention, which just celebrated its 12th year, I believe, and it's in Philly, actually. It used to be at Temple University, and now it's it's in West Philly now, actually. And basically, it celebrates images by everybody around, positive images around like black characters, right? Not just superheroes, but everybody. Maurice Waters, he was a co-founder. He created BlackSci-Fi.com. There's also the Glyph Awards, which is pretty much like the Image Awards of comics. So it's like, just excellence in the area dealing with those particular types of characters. There's World of Hurt, which is an online comic. It's like inspired by blaxploitation. Let's see, this is Joseph Wheeler III, who created OnyxCon, which is a large African-American centered comics convention in Atlanta. Trimeca.com, which is a studio out of North Carolina. Actually, Stacy Robinson is my partner in Black Kirby, and he's about to become my graduate student like this year at University of Buffalo. So he's going to study under me and make comics. Jerry Craft, also Alexander Simmons, who does this piece called Kids Comic Con, because he's like, we don't make comics for kids anymore, that kind of thing. Ghetto Manga, which is by Samak Samin, he's out of Texas, and he does like an online magazine. He also publishes like a printed magazine that collects all this stuff together. Let's see, Andre Bass is out of Detroit. He actually has a Detroit version of Ekbach as well that jumps off actually pretty soon. Ghetto Sake, which is out of Sacramento. This young lady is named Ashley Wood. She's a self-taught artist. She sold actually about 4,000 copies of her totally, self-created comic at, manga conventions. And she's like lives in the south of Chicago. She taught herself like conversational Japanese. Genius. I don't know how she did it. Anyway, so things about the future. There's this gentleman named Rob Salkowitz who created this piece called the Comic-Con and the Business of Pop Culture. Anybody been to Comic-Con? I was just there, and I'm like, let me tell you, 150,000 people in one space, it's bananas. So one of the things he talks about, oh, you got that? Anyway, I'm sorry. So anyway, one of the things he talks about is the fact that, we have to diversify comics. I love comics, and I think that they really still haven't gotten the type of spotlight that they've got in our country like they have in other countries. And because now it's so corporate controlled, it's really hard to break in and stuff like that. But because of like printing on demand technology, because of stuff like Comixology, you can actually put your comics out now, right? And so he was looking at one thing as like, do not turn your back on comics by different people who aren't represented in the mainstream, and don't turn your back on comics from other cultures. Like these are Kenyan comic books. Like the continent of Africa are generating like these amazing comics now. I just met these brothers from Barbados. There's 14 of them. They're called Beyond Comics Publishing. 14 people. They're like the Wu-Tang Clan of comic books. It's crazy. And they're like prolific. I mean, seriously, look at this. Oh, by the way, for mature audiences mostly. But yeah, this is just like ridiculously good. I was like, who are you guys and how can I help you, And all this stuff is available on Comixology and stuff too. Also, my friend Jibamole Anderson, he's out of Chicago. His whole thing was like, you know, characters that we love, like Thor, like I love Thor, that's the first thing I ever tried to draw. Hercules is based off of Greek mythology. What about like West African mythology? So he actually has a whole cadre of superheroes called the Horsemen that are based on the Orisha from West Africa. So, you know, there's Shango and there's Yemaya, all these different characters, but they're like the Avengers, but they're based off of like these ancient African myths. So he came up with this idea called the Blaxis, which is basically multicultural comics, you know, by all these different people who are kind of loosely connected. And so this is something that he just proposed earlier. People like myself who are like really trying to create comics for everyone, but from different perspectives. There's stuff like Dread or Alive is from Jamaica. Bayou, which won like 5 Glyph Awards by my friend Jeremy Love. It's an amazing book. It's almost like Song of the South meets Alice in Wonderland, and they did Bayou. Anyway, it's really good. Let's see, Erica Alexander and her husband, Tony Puryear. I don't know if you remember Erica Alexander from like Living Single, but she also was in this new movie, this new show called, I think, Low Rising Sun, or it's Winter Sun. It's a new, it comes on after Breaking Bad. Anyway, so another Breaking Bad reference. Yeah, it's called Concrete Park, and it's published by Dark Horse Comics, and they work on it together. Watson and Holmes, they have like a black Sherlock Holmes story. And it's really well done, and it's awesome. Genius, which is about this young black woman who's like she's an undercover cop, but she's also like a drug kingpin, and it's created by Afua Richardson out of Atlanta. Molly Danger, which was totally crowdfunded. He got like, Jamal Igo got like $60,000 to work on this, like just from like, you know, from Kickstarter. It's crazy. Oh yeah, Smut Peddler, it is what you think it is. Miranda Mercury, like black female Buck Rogers. How cool is that? Shadow Law, which actually just won best writer for Brandon Easton. It's a multicultural future piece with like vampires and things. You know, actually, what I'm going to do, oh, here we go. Because I want to have some time for questions, because I think I'm close to my time. Yeah. Anyway, last year we did this thing at the Schomburg Research Library called it was a Black Comics Festival, and the Schomburg totally didn't realize how popular this particular culture was, and so we were crushed. 1,300 people in like maybe 4 or 5 hours. It was ridiculous. So we're gonna do it again. They were like, oh my God, this comics thing is pretty exciting. It's like, yeah, we told you, stupid. Anyway, yeah, so it was like, it was fun, and it was like all day, and it was like, I felt pummeled. It was the best feeling. I mean, I was crushed with like people. I couldn't even eat. Could you please go get me some Chinese food or something? I'm dying up here. So seriously, it was really cool. I was signing stuff going out the door. It was amazing. You know, I want to do it again. So there's also this gentleman named Jonathan Gales who did this DVD called White Scripts, Black Superman, which is it's through California Newsreel, and it's about those initial characters from the 1970s. It's a very well done documentary, and I'm not just saying it because I did the cover and I'm in it. I'm not doing that. Anyway, the other thing is Carbonerdius. I'm gonna end with this because it talks about this kind of like idea of being split in half. Being a nerd and being black at the same time, right, is a very interesting space. So Carbonerdius is about this film that my friend Tony Williams is working on. It's gonna be excellent. It's about black nerds and black geeks, and how this particular type of space is a way to talk about these different modes of agency, of expression, and about different modes of identity. And I hope I hope you get a chance to see it, and I'm gonna stop talking. How about that? Thank you.